Hello and welcome to Unacademy, a one-stop destination for the English medium civil services aspirants. Welcome to the last lap, which is a special series that we have started this week to help you quickly revise some of the most important topics for your upcoming prelims. Today I'm going to cover several important organizations and reports, which is a very important part of our syllabus for UPSC Prelims examination. Now, this is one segment that many students find it to be very challenging to cover because there are so many organizations, so many reports and indices. So today what I have done is that based on the important developments of the last 2 years, I have carefully curated some of the most important reports and organizations, and we shall take a quick look at all these topics in the most comprehensive manner possible. The idea is to simplify this area for you so that at least few questions might appear in the upcoming exam. Because it's humanly impossible to sit and read about every organization and every report. But through a careful assessment of the current affairs, we can pick and choose some of the most important organizations and reports. So let's quickly summarize at least 20 topics over the next 1 hour. Now, if you are liking our initiative, if you're benefiting from all the prelims related initiatives that we have launched, including Conquer Prelims, do support us through your comments, your likes, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel. So before we start, I have a very important announcement. To further help you in your prelims preparation, we are launching a separate mock test for CSAT on the 12th of June. I am sure many of you find CSAT to be challenging. You must be familiar with last year's trend where many students could not clear prelims, not because they didn't do well in GS, but they did not clear the CSAT paper. You might have noticed that CSAT difficulty has also increased year by year. So this would be an opportunity for you to test your CSAT skills. You would get curated questions along with explanations and formulas and a cheat sheet, which would be immensely helpful for the CSAT paper. So do attempt this particular test on the 12th of June at 2:30 p.m. and the link will be provided in the video description. And also our online classroom program has just started, a new batch has begun, and you can enroll for the program by taking a 15-month subscription at just $29,999. So with this, let's get started with the first topic and let's look at the Global Economic Prospects Report, which is published by the World Bank, which was reported widely in newspapers last year. The Global Economic Prospects Report is published by the World Bank twice a year. Every 6 months, this important report is brought out, and what makes this report very unique is that it focuses on the developmental prospects available for emerging economies and developing countries. This report provides special focus, special attention to the developmental prospects available to emerging markets and developing economies, which includes India as well. That is one reason why this report could be very important. Now, please understand that today's discussion might be a little factual because that is exactly how the topics are. But however, you need not sit and mug up every data, all the numbers brought out by the reports. UPSC is unlikely to go into that area. There are certain reports where the broad trends would be important. I'll point that out to you. But you should basically get hold of these facts. What does the report deal with? Who publishes the report? When was the organization established? What is its structure? What is the governing structure? Such basic facts would be necessary for your prelims. So without wasting any time, without diving into any unnecessary aspect, let's just focus on the key facts that are needed for the upcoming exam. So with regard to Global Economic Prospects Report, these are some basic details you need to remember. It is published twice a year and it focuses on the prospects, the economic prospects available to emerging economies and developing countries, and it is published by the World Bank. Now, there are many other important reports that are published by the World Bank. For example, we have the World Development Report, which has also been frequently in the news. The World Development Report is an eagerly awaited report that is published by the World Bank, and it is an annual report that has been published since 1978. This report provides an in-depth analysis of the economic development that is taking place around the world. It provides great insight into specific sectors of economic development or specific areas of economic development. For example, in 1 year it focuses on agriculture sector. Sometimes the report will focus on tourism. It will focus on digital infrastructure. So it will identify specific sectors which are driving economic activities around the world, and it dives into that area, providing the challenges, the opportunities that are available. And it's a very insightful document which is closely watched by governments, policy makers, and even experts and analysts. That is what makes the World Development Report of the World Bank a very important document. Now, the 2023 report that was published is very unique and very important for our exams, because last year the World Development Report focused on migrants, refugees, and the impact of migrants and refugees on societies. In the current context, I feel the report that was published is very, very important, because over the last few years, there have been many civil wars, conflicts, which has aggravated the refugee problem. There has been large-scale migration of people. Those who have the right skills, who migrate for better jobs, better livelihood, even illegal migrants who try to cross over into other countries illegally, who try to seek a better livelihood but without the legal documents. So migration-related issues, refugee-related problems has been a pressing issue in global geopolitics. Be it the Rohingya refugee crisis, which has affected India, Bangladesh, and Southeast Asia, or the flow of refugees from Syria, Iraq, and other parts of West Asia and North Africa towards Europe across the Mediterranean, or even the refugee problems seen in Afghanistan, in Central Asia, and the large-scale flow of illegal migrants around the world, even from India. Especially in the last couple of years, the scale of illegal migration from India has gone up, especially into United States, European countries. So since these issues have hit global headlines, it is a key driver of bilateral relations today as well, because countries are extremely concerned about the large flow of refugees and migrants. India also receives quite a bit of refugee inflow and illegal migrants from countries like Bangladesh, Myanmar, etc. So given these developments, the 2023 report, the World Development Report, becomes very important. So there are some important trends that were brought out by the report. I'll just shed some light on it, because based on this, there can be a prelims question. The report pointed out that Indians who are migrating to another country for work, right, they are seeing an income gain of 120%, especially the skilled labor force, the well-educated, well-skilled workforce of India, which moves out of the country seeking better opportunities abroad. They see a massive jump in their income levels. Their earning capacity almost doubles, goes up by 120%. If, let's say, they were to migrate within India, internally, from one state to another to find a better job, they might see an income jump of just 40%, according to the report. But if they leave the country and go to some other country and use their skills, their experience to get employment in another country, they will see a massive income jump of 120%. Now, why is this significant? It is very significant because today India is one of the biggest contributors to the migrant workforce of the world. You name any country, you will find a strong Indian workforce present in almost every single country. And as a result, India today receives one of the highest inflow of inward remittances. The money that the migrant workers send back to their families in India, it becomes part of inward remittances. It has become a crucial part of our economy today, and the remittances have crossed $100 billion every year. We have crossed the $100 billion mark over the last couple of years. We have even overtaken China as the world's largest recipient of inward remittances. So that is another important development which makes this report and the topic very, very important. And also please note that the report has highlighted the top migration corridors of the world. The India-US corridor, from India to US, every year lakhs of students and workers migrate for study, for work, plus there are thousands of Indians trying to enter the US illegally as well. Last year, for example, according to the US border authorities, almost 1 lakh Indians were detained as they were trying to enter the United States illegally by taking the help of human trafficking networks. The next big migration corridor is the India GCC route. From India to the GCC countries, that is West Asia. If you look at West Asia, the Gulf region, you have almost 10 million plus Indians residing and working in the Gulf countries, from Saudi Arabia to Kuwait to Bahrain, Qatar, UAE, Oman, etc. So this happens to be one of the major migration corridors, and also West Asia is the biggest source of remittances for India. Then you have the Bangladesh-India route. From Bangladesh, a lot of migrants come into India, and many of them are illegal migrants. This leads to social problems in India. It aggravates the polarization in the society on religious lines as well. And it has become a major political issue as well. So these migration corridors connected to India, they are on par with other major migration corridors of the world, such as the Mexico-US corridor, the China-US migration corridor, Philippines-US corridor, Kazakhstan-Russia corridor. Just remember these top migration corridors. There might be again a question, right, related to the World Development Report 2023. Now, let's take a quick look at some of the other important reports and indices published by the World Bank. We've already taken a look at a couple of them. Now, I'll just give you the names of some other important reports and indices, and it's better to be familiar with them. One was the ease of doing business, one of the most popular indices and reports published by World Bank, but now it has been discontinued. It used to measure the ease with which you can start a business, run a business, and close down a business. But following a controversy over its methodology and following allegations that some countries were interfering with the process and influencing the process, this index has been discontinued from 2021. The other important World Bank reports are the remittance report that tracks inward and outward remittances around the world, the ease of living index that focuses on the standard of living in various cities around the world, logistics performance index which tracks the movement of goods, the performance of supply chains and the logistic infrastructure available around the world, India development update, a specific report on India's development, universal health coverage index and the service trade restriction index. So you don't have to go into the details, just knowing these names and knowing that World Bank publishes them should be more than sufficient. Now let's look at the World Bank itself. Let's talk about the organization, because the World Bank has been repeatedly in the news and there might be a possible question related to the World Bank. The World Bank is one of the two Bretton Woods institutions that was set up in 1944. In 1944, at Bretton Woods Hotel, a conference was called to lay down the foundation for the international financial architecture. Yesterday as well I was mentioning the international financial architecture. So in 1944, following the Bretton Woods Conference, two very important institutions were established, the World Bank and the IMF. The World Bank consists of 5 different institutions which play a very important role in funding developmental projects and developmental initiatives around the world. Initially, it was established as IBRD, the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. Later, the entire group of institutions that includes 5 different institutions collectively are called the World Bank. So its main focus is on assisting the development of other countries, especially low-income countries, middle-income countries, funding developmental projects, sustainable initiatives. So it provides concessional funding, development assistance. It drives private investment and brings the private sector as well to make bigger investments in low-income and middle-income countries. So the primary focus of World Bank is developmental initiatives to arrange finance for developmental programs, from projects related to climate change to projects related to rural development, poverty alleviation, education, healthcare, connectivity, infrastructure. All such developmental projects are funded through the World Bank. India also is one of the beneficiaries, as we receive lot of developmental funds from the World Bank. So it's one of the UN specialized agencies as well. It has 189 member countries, including India. Now, which are the 5 institutions that make up the World Bank group? You have IBRD, which was the original institution, the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development. It mainly provides low-cost loans, concessional loans, to low-income and middle-income countries to fund these developmental projects. Then you have IDA, International Developmental Assistance, which provides very low-interest loans for low-income countries for developmental works. You have IFC, International Finance Corporation, that provides funding for the private sector to drive economic activities in emerging economies, least developed countries. It arranges financing for the private sector in those countries. Then you have Multilateral Guarantee Agency, the MIGA, which encourages private companies to invest in foreign countries. It will try to bring in the big institutional investors, right, and drive their investments towards emerging markets and underdeveloped countries. And we also have the International Center for the Settlement of Investment-Related Disputes. When there is foreign investments being made, disputes might emerge between those governments and the private investors. So to settle those disputes and to stabilize the international markets, you have this institution as well under the World Bank group. So India is a member of the first 4, but we are not a member of the last institution. So these are the basic facts that you need to know about the World Bank and some of its important reports. Now let's look at the 4th topic, Green and Social Bond Impact Report, that was published recently. This is also related to the World Bank group. The Green Bond and Social Bond. This is a program run by the International Finance Corporation. I just explained that IFC, it lends to the private sector. So this institution of the World Bank has brought out a report on the functioning of its green bonds and social bonds. I'm sure all of you understand what are bonds. It's a investment, a derivative, or a debt instrument essentially, right? IFC floats these green bonds and social bonds which are bought out by investors, private investors. The funds that are raised through these green bonds and social bonds are channeled towards certain initiatives. For example, the Green Bond Program launched in 2010 by the IFC raises funds for green projects, for climate mitigation projects. Next, the Social Bond Program was launched in 2017. The funds raised through these debt instruments are pushed towards social development programs for poverty alleviation, for education, healthcare, etc. So IFC has brought out this report last year to measure the progress that has been made, the achievements of the Green Bond and the Social Bond Initiative. So this report is called Green and Social Bond Impact Report. It measures the impact of the green bonds and social bonds that were issued through the IFC. So very simple topic, but if you know the facts, only then can you answer these questions, because some of these topics are very obscure. They may not have been reported in all the newspapers, right? They may not have hit global headlines, but still UPSC might focus on such topics. So I feel such a quick revision, I think, would be very helpful for you to quickly go through these important major topics as well and the relatively obscure topics as well. Let's look at topic number 5, the World Economic Situation and Prospects Report 2023. So this report is published by the UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs along with UNCTAD. Remember, yesterday we spoke about UNCTAD. I explained what is UNCTAD and its composition and structure. So the UN Conference on Trade and Development, which is now called as UN Trade and Development, along with UN Department on Economic and Social Affairs, together they published this important report called World Economic Situation and Prospects 2023. So what does the report deal with? This report highlights the economic prospects for the world in that given financial year. 2023 was a very difficult year for the global economy because there were many challenges. First, we were still dealing with the hangover of the COVID-19 pandemic. Next, the global conflicts that broke out, the Russia-Ukraine war, the Gaza war, they have disrupted global supply chains. It has pushed the world towards a recession. In the Chinese economy, in the American economy, in European economy as well, there has been a slowdown. Japan has been decelerating. So all these economic risks, they are flagged in such a report. It paints a picture of the global economy and provides the available prospects and opportunities. So that is why this report published by UNCTAD and UNDESA is very important. Next, which are the other reports published by UNCTAD? Please take a note of this. You can write this down. The Trade and Development Report, the LDC Report on Least Developed Countries, Information Economy Report, and Technology and Innovation Report. Again, you don't have to go into the details of these reports, not necessary. Just know which institution is publishing them. That is more than enough. Yesterday, I have already discussed what is UNCTAD. If you haven't seen the video, please go back and watch that session as well. Next, what is UNDESA? The UN Department of Economic and Social Affairs. Given the importance of Sustainable Development Goals and Agenda 2030, this UN department, I feel, is going to be very important. This UN department publishes some very important reports as well, such as the World's Women Report, which is published once in 5 years, the World Population Prospects, the World Youth Report, World Social Report, World Economic Situation and Prospectus or Prospects Report, which I just mentioned. These are some very important reports brought out by UNDESA, and its main focus is to help the UN members to achieve the Sustainable Development Goals. It provides training, sharing of technical information and assistance. It runs capacity building programs to help out governments at the national level and regional level so that they can address the most pressing developmental problems. Its principles are rooted in the UN Charter. Its primary goal is to drive sustainable development and help the world achieve the 17 targets identified under Sustainable Development Goals. So it shares expertise, conducts training programs, conducts capacity building initiatives, provides for sharing of information and best practices between the UN members. So this is the task of UNDESA, and it brings out these important reports that gives us update. It gives us a progress record of the progress that countries are making towards their sustainable development targets. So in that regard, UNDESA can become important for our prelims. Next, topic number 8, the Global Risk Report. The Global Risk Report is another eagerly awaited report by policymakers and investors as well, because it tells you about the economic risk factors that are present, which could affect the GDP of not just the world but certain countries as well. It looks out for various risk factors. There are 5 categories of risks which are monitored, and this important report is published by the World Economic Forum, the WEF. I'm sure all of you would have heard about the World Economic Forum, right? At Davos in Switzerland, every year the World Economic Forum is held, that brings government leaders, investors, business leaders together, and the WEF publishes this very, very important report called the Global Risk Report. Again, this particular report is more important given the major headwinds and risks that the global economy has been facing over the last 3 to 4 years. Right from the COVID-19 pandemic to the Russia-Ukraine war and the Gaza war, plus all the other destabilizations that we have seen. They've all hit the global economy. So this report tracks these risk factors based on a risk perception survey. The risk that is perceived by the investors, the risk perceived by the consumers as well, they play a big role in determining global spending, global investments, and this has a huge economic and even social impact. So the important risk factors which are monitored are economic risk factors. For example, inflation levels, interest rates, the deficit levels, these are monitored under the Global Risk Report. The environmental risks, the risks posed by climate change, global warming, the increasing frequency and amplitude of extreme weather events, and how the disasters are having a long-term impact. The geopolitical risk factors, terrorism, threats by non-state actors like pirates, or even wars and conflicts. They do disrupt the global economy and pose a significant risk for investments, for demand. Then societal and technological risks. For example, cyber crimes. Then artificial intelligence, which can be disruptive. Switch to EVs or electric vehicles, the global transition towards a greener economy. Then social divides that are present, the societal pressures, problems like migration or refugee crisis, the civil wars and riots and rebellions around the world, right? So all these factors play a role in determining risk levels for the global economy and as well as for national economies. So these risks are tracked and reported through the Global Risk Report of the World Economic Forum. This is closely watched by governments, policymakers, investors, banks, and all the key institutions as well. So that is why the Global Risk Report is very, very important. Next, which are the other important reports and indices published by World Economic Forum? You should just have some basic awareness here. So I've given you the entire list. The Global Competitiveness Report, on which UPSC has already asked a question. Global Environment Performance Index, which is very important. I'm going to discuss this as well. Global Gender Gap Index, again, a very important index in the report, and I'm going to discuss these two. The others would be Global Human Capital Report, Travel and Tourism, Competitiveness Report, Enabling Trade, Inclusive Development Index. So just know the names and who publishes them, more than sufficient, but I will discuss the Gender Gap Index and the Environmental Performance Index brought out by the World Economic Forum. The Global Environment Performance Index is one of the key indicators of environmental performance by different countries. Unfortunately, here India doesn't perform well. India has always ranked at the bottom, and unfortunately in 2022 index, India was right at the bottom. India was at the last rank. Amongst 180 countries that were evaluated, India got the 180th rank. That led the government of India to dismiss the index, to question the methodology and criticize the World Economic Forum and the other institutions which are involved in developing the index. This has often been seen where in the recent past, the Indian government has often rejected these reports which make adverse observations about India's performance. So given the controversy surrounding it, and given India's poor performance and ranking, you never know the index which is brought out by the World Economic Forum can be important for our prelims. So World Economic Forum publishes this biennially, meaning once in every 2 years. So in 2022 it was brought out, so the next one will come out this year in 2024. So World Economic Forum has tied up with the Yale and Columbia universities to capture the key parameters and indicators that help in measuring environmental performance, and as well as it works with these institutions to determine the environmental performance around the world and rank the countries accordingly by using the EPI or the Environment Performance Index. Almost 40 indicators are used, which are placed in different categories. 40 performance indicators are identified, and they are primarily organized into 3 pillars: environmental health, the health of environment in different countries, ecosystem vitality, and climate change. These are the 3 broad policy objectives of EPI index, and under each of them there are few categories, and totally there are 40 indicators that are tracked and monitored, based on which a country is given an index, and accordingly the countries are ranked. So amongst the 180 countries measured, India got the last rank, the 180th rank in the 2022 index. Is that clear? So please make a note of these key pointers. This should be more than sufficient. Now let's look at the other important index published by World Economic Forum, which is the Global Gender Gap Index. This is another important index and report, and very crucial from India's viewpoint, because it helps in identifying the gender disparities. It brings out a key social issue. And India has shown a considerable improvement in its performance in the recent past. So because of these reasons, Global Gender Gap Index is also very important. Essentially, it measures gender parity. to what extent there is gender parity, equality between the two genders, and it uses 4 important dimensions to measure the parity with regard to gender. For example, economic participation and opportunity. It tries to measure whether men and women in a country have equal opportunity to participate in the economy. Can they find a job? Can they start a business of their own? Or do women face any specific challenges because of gender discrimination, because of patriarchy? Right? Similarly, educational attainment. If there is a discrimination against the girl child, obviously educational attainment would be affected. So school enrollment and the engagement of the girl child at school is monitored compared with that of a male child. Next, health and survival. In societies where the girl child is often neglected, where there is no gender parity, girl children and even women, their health parameters would be affected, right? They would be receiving poor nutrition. They wouldn't be having access to sanitation and hygiene, and this directly affects survival. So in such societies, in such countries, infant mortality rate, maternal mortality rates would be very high. So these key parameters are tracked. Political empowerment. Is there reservation provided in local elections, national elections? What is the extent of women participation in politics, be it with regard to voting or in key positions? So this is monitored as well as part of the index. So these are the 4 important dimensions. Kindly make a note of this. And India has shown a significant improvement in its performance. We were ranked 135th in 2022, and in the latest report, India has jumped to 127th position out of 146 countries. Even here, India has been ranked at the bottom, but compared to 2022, in the 2023 report, India had jumped a few places because of significant improvement shown across these categories. Is that clear? So these are some of the important reports brought out by the World Economic Forum. Next, we have the State of Global Climate Report, which hit global headlines. In fact, this report, published in 2023, it triggered global alarm as well. You might have read in newspapers that 2023 was declared as the warmest year on record. There were alarming reports regarding the impact of climate change and the apocalyptic future that we are headed towards due to rising temperatures. So if you remember those headlines, right, all those news reports were based on this report. So that is why State of Global Climate Report is important. It is published by the WMO, the World Meteorological Organization. The WMO is one of the specialized agencies of the United Nations, and it brings out this important report that tracks global climate. It's a study of the atmospheric, the oceanic changes that are taking place because of climate change. So the primary goal of WMO is to ensure that we meet the Paris Agreement target, which is to ensure that we keep the global rise in temperatures as compared to pre-industrial levels within manageable limits, within 1.5 degrees Celsius. But according to the latest report of the WMO, 2023 was already the warmest year on record. And what is really shocking is that the report stated that the global average temperature has already increased by 1.45 degrees Celsius as compared to pre-industrial levels. Now this is very, very close to the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold that has been set by the Paris Agreement. The Paris Agreement to the Climate Change Convention lays down a target to ensure that global rise in temperature is limited to under 2 degrees Celsius by the end of the century, and if possible to limit this under 1.5 degrees Celsius as compared to pre-industrial levels. Because any rise in temperature beyond this would lead to irreversible climate change, more disasters, and a direct economic and social impact. So the 2023 State of Global Climate Report was indeed alarming. It was published by the WMO. It has already predicted that 2024 would even overtake the record of 2023 to be the warmest year on record. And in a way, we are witnessing that through deadly heat waves, droughts, forest fires, floods, etc. So it gives us advanced information, predictions about the climate crisis that the world is dealing with, the possible impact on economies, on nations, on communities. and it also helps us understand the greenhouse gas levels, surface temperature, especially the oceanic surface temperature, and other key atmospheric oceanic parameters are brought out through this report. Coming to the WMO itself as an organization, as I was mentioning, it is a specialized agency of the UN, one of the specialized agencies of the UN, established in 1950, headquartered in Geneva with 187 member countries. And India is one of the members of WMO. India works closely with the World Meteorological Organization. So it is a scientific institution. So under the UN, it works with the UN member states, collaborates with other international organizations to study the global environment, to keep track of meteorological conditions and the changes that are taking place, be it the changes in temperature, the changes in atmospheric circulation, the oceanic currents. They're all monitored by the WMO, and the data is brought out through this important report, the State of Global Climate Report. Now please make a note of the three major programs that are implemented by the WMO. I feel this could also be important for your prelims. Since WMO has been in the news, the report published by the WMO also has hit the global headlines. The programs of WMO could also be important. The World Weather Watch. This is a global monitoring system that WMO has established through a series of satellites and telecommunication networks and sensors based on land, sea, etc. to monitor the weather conditions. The WMO coordinates with various governments and other institutions, and it has established a global weather watch system, which is basically a monitoring surveillance system, right? And it keeps track of major weather events, meteorological events, and also plays a role in early warning and forecasting. All right. Next, you have World Climate Program to monitor the changes happening in our climate in the long term climate change, which is primarily triggered by anthropogenic factors. They are tracked and studied through the World Climate Program. And finally, you have Atmospheric Research and Environment Program, which specifically focuses on ozone layer depletion. The WMO closely keeps an eye on the ozone layer in the stratosphere, the impact of ozone depleting substances, and the efficacy of the Montreal Protocol and the Kigali Amendment, right, which is helping us to replace the ozone depleting substances with non-ozone depleting substances. So WMO publishes a report on the status of the ozone layer as well. So these are some key pointers that you need to remember. Next, topic 14 related to UNEP. In fact, I feel this year UN Environment Program can be very important. So I'll introduce you to some important reports of UNEP and also about the organization itself, and you can anticipate a question here. UNEP's report for buildings and construction sector. This is again a very obscure topic, but it can be very important because the building and construction sector contributes to 21% of global greenhouse gas emissions. For example, the construction material that is used in buildings, right? It contributes to global warming. If unsustainable materials are used, if materials which are not suited for local climatic conditions are used, this will directly add to the urban heat island effect. It will contribute to localized heating, which can disrupt the weather patterns and the climatic patterns. So this particular report of UNEP studies the impact of building and construction on climate change. What would be the contribution to greenhouse gas emissions from the building and construction sector is monitored through this report. Because construction activity can directly contribute to emissions, increased emissions. And according to the study by UNEP, it is already contributing 21% of the total greenhouse gas emissions. In India, 40% of CO2 emissions are attributed to the building and construction sector, according to this UNEP report. So because of these findings, the report becomes important. See, otherwise it is a very obscure report. But because of these two important data pointers that are brought out with the report, this report becomes very important. So UNEP publishes this jointly with Global ABC, the Global Alliance for Building and Construction Sector. Now take a look at some other important reports of UNEP. The Global Environment Outlook, we are going to discuss this now. Emissions Gap Report, another very important report, I'll discuss this as well. Global Waste Management Outlook, which focuses on management of waste, scientific management of waste. Adaptation Gap Report, Global Resources Outlook and Food Waste Index Report. So we are going to wrap up today's discussion by looking at some of these reports and some of the organizations related to them. So let's look at Emissions Gap Report, which is also frequently in the news. The Emissions Gap Report of UNEP, it basically tracks the future levels of emission that would be emitted by a country even after implementing all its climate action programs. And it tells you the gap, the difference between the ideal level of emissions in order to avoid the deadly impact of climate change and what is the shortfall in the climate action efforts of different countries. So this is the gap being measured through the Emissions Gap Report. In order to avoid the deadly impact of climate change, the irreversible impact of climate change, there would be an ideal level of emissions, right, which would be determined by the UNEP. This is compared with the future emissions expected by a country after implementing its climate action targets. So the gap that exists between them, between these two goals, between the ideal goal and the more realistic goal which might be achieved. This is the Emissions Gap Report. It shows by what margin countries are going to fail when it comes to reducing emissions. Is that clear? For every country there is a threshold. Beyond that, the impact of climate change is going to be deadly and irreversible. Some countries have announced their voluntary initiatives. Under Paris Agreement, they have taken up nationally determined contributions with the objective of keeping the global rise in temperature to under 1.5 degrees Celsius. So between the projected expectation and the ideal goal, there is a gap. Now India, for example, has announced few NDCs with regard to deforestation, switching to clean energy, renewable energy, reducing the emissions intensity, etc. Now, this report will estimate, after India implements all these initiatives, what will be the future emissions and what would be the shortfall for India compared to our ideal emissions in order to avoid the irreversible impact of climate change. This gap is your emissions gap. This is measured through this report published by UN Environment Program. So this is like a wake-up call. It puts countries on a notice. It helps countries understand what will be the shortfall even after taking up all these proposed climate action initiatives. So that is why this important report is published every year right before the Conference of Parties to the Climate Change Convention. Usually November, December of every year, the Conference of Parties to UNFCCC is held. So just few days or few weeks before the Climate Change Convention, this Emission Gap Report is published by UNEP. So this serves as a wake-up call for all countries to understand what is the shortfall even after their proposed initiatives will be implemented. See, first of all, no country will be exactly achieving the announced nationally determined contributions. They might fall short of their own announcements. So the report is actually taking into account that even if they implement all the initiatives, okay, this would be the future emissions. Even after that, there will be a shortfall compared to what should have been the ideal level of emissions. So this emission gap brought out by UNEP it's a wake-up call. It's a very important indicator for countries that they have to do more. So it is published deliberately right before the Climate Change Convention COP or Conference of Parties, so that countries are basically put on notice when they participate in the Climate Change Summit. Next, the Global Environment Outlook, published by UNEP. Another very important report. UPSC might ask a question here. Since 1995, UNEP has been publishing this flagship report. It's called a flagship report because it meets one of the core objectives of UNEP, the UN Environment Program. When the UNEP was established, it was established for a specific reason. It was given a mandate. So it fulfills one of the core objectives of UNEP, and hence It is a flagship report. So this report tracks the status of global environment at the global level, at the national level, at the regional and local levels as well. It will look at important ecosystems, environmental habitats, the degree to which they are being damaged by human activities, the initiatives taken up to protect our environment. So based on that, an assessment is provided through the report that paints a picture about the status of the global environment. So this important report is published by the UN Environment Programme. Is that clear? It is a flagship report published by UNEP and fulfills one of its core mandate or core objectives. Next, the Food Waste Index report. This is another important report which was in the news because food wastage, food insecurity has become a major topic over the last 15 to 18 months. First of all, the Russia-Ukraine war disrupted food supplies and created a shortage of food commodities. It led to food inflation. It led to food insecurity in many poor countries as well. Then upon that, you have more and more extreme weather events, from droughts to heat waves to forest fires and floods, which are destroying crops, leading to food insecurity in many parts of the world. So any index or report related to food wastage, food loss is very crucial, and UNEP is responsible for this index called the Food Wastage Index, based on which a report is also published. Understood? So it is brought out by UNEP along with the Waste and Resources Action Program, published before the International Day of Zero. So here, the index basically tracks the extent of food wastage which is happening, right? The amount of food, edible food, which is being wasted because of poor storage, overconsumption, or irresponsible behavior of consumers and restaurants and industries. So that amount of wastage of food is tracked through the index. All right. Similarly, there is something called food loss index. There is a difference between food wastage, which is a deliberate wastage because you're either over consuming, you're buying more and eventually disposing the food, or the food is being carelessly handled, maybe at mega events, huge social gatherings. Large quantities of food is prepared and completely discarded eventually. So such unforgivable wastage of food is measured through this index. It could happen through governments, through individuals or organizations, or through private entities. So such food wastage is tracked and measured. And similarly, there is something called food loss. Food loss occurs during storage and transportation. Basically, it's due to the weakness in logistics, the weakness in the back end of the supply chain. So from the farm to the warehouse, to the markets, to eventually to your table, there could be a lot of wastage or food loss that happens. The unavailability of cold storage chains, the unavailability of scientific methods of storing food, this could increase food loss within the food supply chain, and this in a way contributes artificially to food insecurity. It creates artificial food insecurity. So tracking both food loss and food wastage is a priority under Sustainable Development Goal number 12. Under SDG number 12, there is a specific sub-target, SDG 12.3.1 clause A. It talks about food loss index to measure the food losses occurring in the supply chains, the post-harvest losses, the production-related losses in the food processing industry, etc. This is tracked and monitored by the Food and Agriculture Organization. FAO is the designated institution which is the custodian of the Food Loss Index. Similarly, UN Environment Programme is the custodian for the Food Waste Index, the food wastage which is happening. So under SDG 12.3.1 clause B, per capita global food wastage at both retail and consumer levels is expected to be reduced by 50%. The food wastage that we are contributing to at individual level, right, and also at the retail level and at the consumer level. This is tracked through the Food Waste Index by UNEP. So both these indices related to food loss and food wastage is very crucial to promote responsible consumption and production, which is SDG number 12, to ensure that overconsumption, consumerism is tackled in order to promote sustainable methods of production and guarantee food security to the world by minimizing wastages. So that is why this report is very important, which is published by UN Environment Programme. Now, since we have discussed so much about UNEP reports, please note down some basic facts as well about the UNEP. There can be a direct question on this organization. It was established in 1972 following the Stockholm Conference that was held. In 1972 in Sweden, the UN Conference on the Human Environment was held under the United Nations. This was the first such gathering under the UN which exclusively focused on environment-related issues. The UN Conference on Human Environment, which was held in Stockholm, is also called the Stockholm Conference. So during this UN meeting, a lot of goals, priorities, principles were adopted, and one of the target was to establish an institution under the UN to look after environment-related issues. So that is how UNEP, also called UN Environment or UN Environment Programme, was born. It was established in 1972 through the Stockholm Conference, and it is governed through the UN Environment Assembly that was formed in 2012. The UN Environment Assembly is the decision-making body, the governing council of the UNEP. It has 193 members. All the UN member states are party to it, including India. The meet of UNEP, the UN Environment Assembly, takes place once in every 2 years, headquartered in Nairobi in Kenya. So some basic facts. And under UNEP, there is a mandate which has been given through the Stockholm Conference. 6 priority areas have been identified. This includes climate change, post-conflict disaster management, ecosystem management, environmental governance, harmful hazardous substances, resource efficiency, sustainable consumption and production. These are the 6 priorities given to UNEP. How will these aspects affect the global environment? That is the focus of UNEP. How can disasters affect environment and biodiversity? Disasters can cause environmental damage, so that is a priority. Climate change is already having an impact on environment and biodiversity. So managing that, studying that is one of the roles of UNEP. Hazardous substances, harmful toxic substances. It can cause air pollution, water pollution, pollute the soil. So this affects environment and biodiversity, and that is a priority for UNEP. So kindly note down these 6 focus areas of UNEP identified through Stockholm Conference. Now coming to the last topic for today, even this is related to migration, because I feel this year migration is going to be an important topic. Along with climate change and environment related topics, migration related topics and global economic prospect related topics are important. That is the theme I have chosen for today. One was migration. Next, as you saw, we discussed few environment and climate change related reports and organizations. And next, global economic prospects, given the risk factors that exist for the global economy. So this is the theme I chose based on the developments of the last 15 to 18 months. And then I narrowed down these organizations and reports for a detailed discussion so that it can be a quick revision. And this might guarantee a good hit rate as well in the exam. Maybe there could be some questions from what we have studied. So let's look at the last topic and wrap up the session. The Migrant Deaths Report. This is published by the International Organization for Migration. As I told you, the world is dealing with the problems related to refugee crisis, movement of migrants, internally displaced people. And there is an organization called IOM, International Organization for Migration, that specifically looks into protection of migrants. Is that clear? So it brings out a very important report called Migrant Deaths Report, because migration is very risky. Be it legal migrants who are legally traveling to another country. They might have got legal documents, they have the right skills, they meet the eligibility criteria, so they get the visas of other countries and they go to work. Even this could be risky. They might lose their lives in the process because there are many risks for the diaspora community. Just look at the US. in the last few months, many Indian students have lost their lives from accidents to murders, etc. Right? So this does affect the well-being of migrant population. Look at how refugees are facing a major challenge. There is a direct threat to their lives. First of all, refugees are fleeing their home country because there is a threat to their life. When they seek asylum in other countries, or when they are in the process of transit, when they take a risky route to enter another country, right, they might lose their lives in the process. Look at how many Rohingya boats have capsized in Bay of Bengal when Rohingyas were trying to flee into Bangladesh or Thailand or Malaysia. Look at what happens in the Mediterranean, right? A lot of refugees, they try to cross the Mediterranean through these very small boats with the help of human trafficking agents in the hope of entering Europe so that they can seek asylum and take refuge. But in the process, many boats sink and many people lose their lives. So this has become a humanitarian tragedy. Look at illegal migrants, the way illegal migrants cross over, the risk they take. You might have seen the movie Donkey, right, which is a reference to the donkey route or the donkey route. Lakhs of Indians every year, they are trying to move abroad illegally. They don't have the skills, they don't have the eligibility, they don't meet the basic requirements, but still they want to go abroad. They want to live the American dream. In many states, Punjab, Andhra Pradesh, and several other states in India, we have seen this huge trend because either it's a status symbol, right, to move abroad, settle abroad at any cost, or sometimes it's a necessity. In Gujarat as well, in Punjab, in Tamil Nadu, there have been many incidents where Indian illegal migrants have tried crossing over into US and Europe and they have lost their lives in the process. They take a risky route through Mexico, through Canada, right? Even for entering Europe, they take a very risky route and many Indians have lost their lives. So there have been many related incidents. That is why I feel the migrant related topic is very important. So this report tracks the number of migrants who are losing their lives. Legal migrants, illegal migrants, refugees, and even IDPs, internally displaced people. Those who are displaced within a country because of a war or a conflict or a disaster, they are called IDPs. So this report documents the death of migrants and the numbers are quite alarming. It has increased significantly. And that is why it basically points towards the migrant crisis. So this report gives us the data regarding the deaths and disappearances of migrants who are trying to move to other countries. Now coming to IOM, the organization itself. It was established in 1951. It is a UN related organization. Alright, it's a UN related organization and it runs programs for ensuring the safety and well-being of the migrants in order to ensure that basic rights are protected, to provide basic welfare, to ensure they have access to basic facilities and necessities. The IOM works with governments around the world wherever there is a migrant problem. So that is the role of IOM. It's a UN related organization headquartered in Geneva with 175 members, including India. So these basic facts are more than sufficient. So in a short span of time, in just around 1 hour, we have covered 20 important reports, organizations, and I hope it's been a useful session. So on this note, I would like to complete the discussion for today. Do let me know what you think. Do let me know in the comments. I'll go through them, and do press the like button if you benefited from the initiative. Share the video with other aspirants as well so it might help them right before prelims. And if you haven't subscribed to our channel yet, do hit the subscribe button. So join us again tomorrow at 7 p.m. This series, the last lap, will continue for a few more days till the 14th of June. We still have sessions coming up on economy. Tomorrow, Shyam sir will be discussing important graphs and ratios from Indian economy. Then Mukesh sir, day after, will discuss some important environment related concepts. And finally, on 13th and 14th of June, Sarmad sir will discuss important polity related topics. First, Sarmad sir will cover the important articles in the constitution, and then he'll be covering the important constitutional amendments, which is going to be very important for your prelims. So do attend all these sessions live at 7 p.m. and I can assure you that all these practice sessions that we have conducted over the last 1.5 months, they are going to be of immense help in the upcoming prelims exam. So on this note, I would like to end the discussion for today. Thanks for watching. Have a good night.